You are listening to This Week in Clown World with Ben and Hobbs, so sit back, relax, take your black pill, and enjoy the show.
And we're live.
Well, howdy do, friends. It's time for another episode of This Week in Clown World with Ben and Hobbs. And Nathan, too! Oh, my goodness. Yes, we decided to bring in the third wheel because, whoo boy, is there a load to carry. How are we doing, gentlemen?
Still alive. Nathan's muted.
Shit, sorry. No, I figured that if we're all going to go up in nuclear hellfire, then might as well join the last episode of Roads to Liberty. You know, we all survived the plague.
Is this where we wrap up all the plot points that we've been building throughout the season? You know, like where I go off to college and get a football scholarship, and is this one of those episodes?
We're going to wrap it up like Lost.
Yeah.
Incredibly unsatisfying.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. Some people are whining about the nukes, I guess. I hadn't heard it, but you brought it up. Some people must be scared.
I mean,
Fallout was such a great game, you might as well just do it in real life, right?
I mean, why not?
I'm looking forward to finding some power armor somewhere.
Giant patriotic robots to lead us
to fight the communists.
Yes.
I mean, if there's a bright spot to the end of the world, it's Liberty Prime killing communists.
And if Liberty Prime is anywhere, it's at Offutt Air Force Base.
Absolutely. That's where we're going to get nuked.
The only thing to survive in eastern Nebraska is going to be cockroaches and a giant shit-talking robot.
Yes, and I will be leading that robot.
I am here for it.
Yeah,
more Death Claws. So, you've been posting some battle reports from Forward Observer. I've watched part of one, but I've been too busy to watch all of them. What can you give a rundown of the Forward Observer battle reports?
Yeah, I watched a good one a couple of days ago. I'll have to shoot Mike a message and see if he can come on again, or him, or maybe his other guy Dustin, who's more of an expert on that side of the world. But so there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, straight up bullshit, and just misdirection, surrounding this whole thing. But basically, from what I can gather, it doesn't really seem like Putin is making as big of an effort as he is making it seem to be. You see the Blitzkrieg offensive that he has taken. He's pretty much steamrolled into almost half of the country in the initial first days, and then ended up just getting stopped. And that's going to be pretty par for course anytime you launch an offensive just out of the blue. And the reason that it seems like he has stopped or been halted by the Ukrainian Defense Forces is there's a number of factors. One is that he's only committed about 50% of the troops that he had staged on the border to actually go into. So he's got double what he's actually committed to the fight. The second thing is that of those 50%, the ones that are in active fighting right now are mostly conscripts using older equipment. His A game is still in Russia and Belarus on standby. And the third reason that it seems like it's been halted in its tracks is because right now the Russian troops in Ukraine are fighting way outside of their standard doctrine. There's the battle doctrine of the Russian military right now is massive combined arms maneuver warfare with heavy artillery and air support. And we're not seeing any of that heavy artillery and air support. If they wanted to, they could flatten pretty much any city with the artillery and the air support that they have on standby and in reserve, but they're not using it. And a couple of reasons that they might not be using it is, one, they want to minimize civilian casualties to maybe have some semblance of a moral high ground after the fact, after the smoke is all cleared, and they could be like, hey, we could have leveled Kiev and not left 2 stones left mortared together, but we didn't. We could have killed every man, woman, and child in the city, but we didn't. Or, and this is a thing that's kind of lost on a lot of us Westerners, is Ukraine, and specifically the region in and around Kiev, is more or less the cradle of Russian civilization. Their culture, everything was birthed in that region. Kiev was a large, prosperous, major city when Moscow was still a swamp in the middle of the woods. A lot of us today, we see Moscow as the capital of Russia, so that's got to be where Russia started. No, that's not the case. The area around Kiev is the cradle of their civilization. So he probably wants to keep as much of that intact, so that in the event that they do take either the whole country or at least parts of the country, they can at least point to that and be like, you are us, we are you. We do not want to destroy our own culture, so we didn't. We put our troops in more danger in order to preserve the cultural heritage of our birthplace. We made that sacrifice, and that might have something to do with it. Now, there's a lot of other things that are going on, and some things I can't verify. A lot of it's just, it's open source. A lot of it's rumor. There are a lot of propaganda psyops going on. You'll see pictures of people tied up on the ground or handcuffed or zip tied or whatever, and it'll be like 6 Russian soldiers captured outside Kiev. And then you'll see the exact same picture labeled as 6 Ukrainian soldiers captured outside Donbass or whatever it is, and they're using the same pictures and just flipping the information, because the Russians and the Ukrainians have equipment and uniforms that's so similar that they can get away with this. And it's really making it hard for not only for Western journalists to paint an accurate picture of what's going on there, it's also making it hard for Russian and Ukrainian civilians, armed forces, and anybody else to know where the front lines are, where the battle lines are. Along with that, the fact that there is just so much blatant bullshit going on, it's making the job of the media on both sides to paint their propaganda any way they want, and at the end of it, they can just shrug their shoulders and be like, "Oh, it's a war, fog of war. We were just as ignorant as you guys. What do you want us to do?"
You see, this pre-proposes a media that doesn't have a motivation to just paint one side of the issue in a positive light and the other in a negative light. I mean, and that's the thing that's going to be really interesting to read about this war in the future, if we all get there, right? Is there's so much propaganda being thrown out there that to us in the West, it's impossible to tell what's actually going on. And of course, you can't believe a word coming out of the mainstream media sources that we have in the U.S., because after the last 2 years, if you still believe those guys, you're a fucking idiot, right? If you fell for the COVID propaganda, you're probably falling for the war propaganda as well. If you're like us and you've been inoculated against that sort of thing, then you're not falling for it. And you're looking at all these stories and you're going, that looks like bullshit. That looks like bullshit. That doesn't look real, right? And you're seeing all this. And it's just funny because there's a lot of people in this country and all around the world, understandably, who want to believe this stuff. Like, they want to believe in the ghost of Kiev. They want to believe in the heroic stand of Snake Island. They want to believe in Ukrainian supermodels picking up airsoft rifles and going to fight the Russians. This is stuff they want to believe. But hold on a minute. As much as you may want to listen to these stories and believe them to be true, remember, these are warring states, and warring states use propaganda as a means to win their wars. It would be negligent of the Ukrainians or the Russians to neglect this aspect of warfare. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if this was all part of Ukraine's war plans to begin with. Like, if Russia ever invades, boom, go into propaganda mode. And they would be smart to do that. That is in their interest to do, because for Ukraine, the only way they win this war is with Western support. And you get Western support with propaganda.
You get Western support by playing the victim. Victimhood is the coin of the realm in current year. And big bad Russia picking on poor little Ukraine it's a Cinderella story as far as the victimization goes.
And it makes the propaganda easy, right? Because like, Ukraine is being invaded. Ukrainian citizens are being killed. There's a lot of things going on in Ukraine right now that are just horrible. Now, which stories are true and which are false, we can't know. And for a sympathetic Western audience, the assumption is to just believe any story that paints Ukraine in a good light and paints Russia in a bad light, regardless of the truth of the matter.
Right. So there's also a lot of things going on in the background. But before I get to the things that I want to talk about going on in the background, I kind of want to go back to what you said there. The overwhelming desire of people, especially in the West, to want to believe in the massacre of Snake Island, Ghost of Kiev, Miss Ukraine taking up arms, Captain Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, So, people want to believe in this stuff because our world has become and when I say our world, I mean, mostly in the West. And you can see this thing with the COVID thing too. They wanted to believe in that so bad as well, because our world has become so safe and so secure that human beings need a struggle, and where one doesn't exist, we tend to invent it. And we've talked about this before, and I think more so than human beings needing a struggle, human beings need a hero. And seeing these mythical heroic figures pop up, like Ghost of Kiev and all this other stuff, it gives people a sense of hope in a world that all of our media is telling us is hopeless, in spite of the fact that we are living in a time of more prosperity, more peace than has ever existed in human history right now. But everything out there is telling you that things are so bad. White supremacists are hiding under every rock. Vladimir Putin has his thumb on the big red button. The world is heating up at an astronomical rate, and the ice caps are melting, and the polar bears are dying, and blah, blah, blah. So glomming on to these heroic figures that they've invented, it gives people a little bit of temporary hope, as false as that is.
So you're saying they need their Ukrainian branded soy milk to drink while stirring it through Zelensky Funko Pop? Is that what?
Yeah. Well, see,
Zelensky Funko Pop is a merchandising waiting to happen.
See, it's kind of ironic, because what you're talking about actually puts us more in danger. Because I don't think a lot of people realize the dangerous moment we're in right now, right? A lot of people, they're looking at this like it's a novel, like this is a TV show, right? The Lannisters are attacking the Starks, and we got to root for the Starks, right? Yep. I mean, they realize, yeah, it's a war, it's real life, but they have this video game mindset. They don't seem to realize that this is the most dangerous situation we've seen in this world since the Cold War, like by far, right? We've never in my lifetime been in a situation where a war between two nuclear armed states is even a possibility.
Yep.
And part of the reason it's a possibility is because of this stupid mindset that a lot of people in this country have. I mean, let's not forget the propaganda that we've been preached to for the last 4 years, right? Do you think Putin was ignorant about how half of this country believed that he overturned an American election and installed a puppet dictator in this country? Do you think he was blind to those lies, to the fact that our intelligence communities, the intelligence communities in the United States were spreading this lie? We're propagating this lie. We're conducting investigations into this lie that they knew was false. And meanwhile, half the country is sitting here saying, oh, look at Vladimir Putin, the next Hitler. And no one's here is saying that Vladimir Putin's a good guy. We're libertarians. We hate politicians, and Vladimir Putin is a politician. But let's not sit here and pretend that there are not consequences to what we say in this country, to the controversies, real or fake, and Russiagate was fake, to the controversies that we pursue, right? And the policies that we enact. The United States is not guiltless in this war, right? We pursued the worst possible policy in regards to Ukraine, right? By telling them some point in the future we'll let you into NATO. You know what that did? It put a target on Ukraine's back. Right? We put Ukraine in an impossible situation. And the closer they got to us, the closer they got to danger. And we let that happen, right? Without giving them any kind of military guarantee. We just kind of said, oh, yeah, come over here, come over here. And when Putin knocked them down from behind, we're like, oh, shit. Sorry about that. Thoughts and prayers. Go get them.
Yep. So I wanted to talk about some of the things that are going on behind the scenes. I think yesterday or day before yesterday, I watched a clip from Glenn Beck's show where he laid out a few things that he's seeing that don't make sense. And then today, I watched a clip where he thinks he's got it. And this is a position that I kind of came to a few days ago after talking to Alex, my friend. I'm gonna try and I'll see if I can get him on tomorrow. Maybe we can go. Yeah, Dewey Shelbourne. I do see your comments, and I'm going to get to. I'm gonna swing back around to them in a second. But a lot of things that Putin is doing, they don't make sense on the surface. Like if your frame of reference is that Putin is a power-mad nationalist who is doing a bunch of crazy and immoral invasions, planning to take over Europe, take over the world on behalf of Mother Russia, then yeah, a lot of what he's doing doesn't seem to make sense. Like, for instance, and stuff that we're doing as well doesn't seem to make sense. Like, why is the United States, Europe, Canada, etc., still buying 500,000 barrels of Russian oil a day? Why did he only commit 50% of his available forces and conscripts with older equipment at that to the front lines? Why, in spite of every single internet service provider in Ukraine being owned by a Russian company, why do the Ukrainians still have the internet and cable TV and all of and cell phone services and everything else that would be used to get any potential atrocities and or propaganda material out into the wider world? None of these things make sense unless you realize that Putin wants this stuff to be seen, wants to keep the money rolling in. And when you think about it, all of these world leaders are talking to each other behind the scenes. Now, they might not be buddies, but they're at least frenemies, right? So I imagine that Putin, in one of these closed-door meetings, or maybe a group chat on Facebook Messenger, or whatever he has with all of the other big-time leaders in the world, he goes to these guys and he's like, hey, listen, I've been your punching bag and your boogeyman for the past 20 years, ever since I ascended to a position of power within Russia. When am I going to get something out of this deal? And they come back to him and they say, well, what do you want? And he says, I want these ethnically Russian portions of eastern Ukraine as a sort of not only to be under my sphere of influence so that I can have that land again, but also as a buffer zone between me and a potential NATO alliance encroachment on my territory. So the other world leaders go, well, we can't just give that stuff to you. We that people will be like, what the hell's going on? Why is this land being ceded without a fight to Russia? So they concoct this wag the dog style war where Putin makes a grand show of sending a lot of troops and military assets into Ukraine and blitzkriegs halfway across the country until he is stopped by the stalwart defenders of Ukraine and pushed back into the territory that he actually wants. And that's when they call the peace table talks. And they sit down and they begin the discussion behind closed doors about where the new borders are going to be drawn. Now, something that Alex brought up that I hadn't heard anywhere else, but he's got people on the ground that know these things. Poland and Hungary have moved large military forces to the border with Ukraine. And one thing that we apparently don't really have a whole lot of knowledge over here in the West is that a lot of Western Ukraine used to belong to Poland and Hungary, and they want that land back. So, in these peace talk agreements that are going to be going on, I imagine that Putin gets Eastern Ukraine, maybe Poland and Hungary will get some of the Western Ukrainian lands back. In all of the fracas, China makes a move on Taiwan, which is a whole other can of worms. They are mobilizing their navy right now to do something out there around Taiwan. So they get Taiwan, Putin gets Eastern Ukraine, Poland and Hungary get a chunk of Western Ukraine. The country of Ukraine is now smaller, more consolidated, but more importantly, more ethnically and culturally homogenous, which means that the people running all of the bribery and blackmail and the money laundering that Ukraine is notorious for can now do it with more precision without having alternate factions of ethnic Russians or ethnic Europeans that might blow the whistle if their particular faction doesn't get something in their best interest. So there's a whole lot going on. And then, of course, there's also the matter with Turkey. Now, I believe that the Polish and the Hungarian forces have been held back for now because getting Article 5 signatories, militaries involved, is going to be too much of a trigger for a NATO invasion. And I believe that's also why Putin has staged his A game still in Belarus and Russia, on the off chance that perhaps a NATO signatory or two move into Western Ukraine and break the deal that they're making behind the scenes to get him the lands that he wants back.
See, this all supposes that NATO or the EU would sit back and be sanguine about Hungary and Poland going into Ukraine. I mean, if things are hot right now because of the Russian invasion, just imagine if Poland and Hungary decided to pull a Poland on Ukraine and partition them.
Well,
right?
Again, things are hot on the ground. Things are hot for the people like you and me that live in those areas. Things aren't necessarily hot between the people that run the EU and Putin. Like I said, if your point of reference is that these two sides hate each other, then a lot of it doesn't make sense. But if your frame of reference is that these guys are talking behind the scenes and wheeling and dealing to carve up and draw new borders with each other, then it starts to make a little bit more sense. And the troops and the civilians on the ground, it's just collateral damage so that the people in charge can get what they want. And at the end of this, I believe that with China having Taiwan, Putin having East Ukraine, Poland and Hungary maybe having bits of Western Ukraine, and Ukraine itself being a smaller, more consolidated country that they can run all their shady shit out of for in perpetuity, all of the elites are going to be happy with what they've got. They can still shake their fists at each other in the media, be like, ooh, that Putin, he's so bad. Ooh, that NATO, they're so bad, in their own respective medias, while the rest of us little people take a bath for it. That's what I think is going on.
I mean, it's an interesting theory, but I don't think you need to rely on the. I don't think the alternative has to be that the West and Putin necessarily hate each other. This doesn't seem this because like back in the days of the Cold War, it was an ideological struggle, right? Communism versus capitalism, authoritarianism versus democracy. You could see the ideological conflict between the two. Like they really did hate each other because of these countering points of view. It was an ideological struggle, much like World War II was. Whereas here, I mean, sure, Russia is run like a dictatorship and an oligarchy, but it's not an ideological state like China is, right? It's just a country with a dictator, right? It's just a guy that runs it. And I think what the conflict that we're seeing here doesn't necessarily have to be backroom deals between powerful statesmen more than it is a parade of blundering buffoons tripping over each other's red lines to the point where now people have to act, right? Because you look at the United States, you look at Joe Biden, he's not cutting any backroom deals. And yes, I understand he's not the puppet master in the United States, but a lot of people in this country look to him for guidance, as sad as that may sound. Like he is still the president of the United States, and he's been blundering his way through this whole thing for years now. And before him, we had people blundering about. Like think of it this way: we've in the last 4 presidents of the United States, only under one of them did Russia never invade anybody, right? Only under one of them. And that apparently was the puppet, right? That apparently was the Putin puppet, right? So what's the common denominator of those other presidents? They all had the same foreign policy. Trump was the only outlier in that regard. He's the only one out of all those presidents who actually made friendly overtures towards Russia, right? Who tried to cool things down between ourselves and Vladimir Putin. Now, Democrats and leftists are going to look at that and say, boom, that's proof. He's a Russian puppet. I look at that and say, that's a smart fucking move. Thank God he was doing that. Because the alternative is what we're seeing right now. Because every president of the United States wants to expand NATO eastwards. Right? Why did Putin invade Georgia way back in the day? Well, it's because Georgia wanted to join NATO. Why is he invading Ukraine right now? It's because NATO is trying to get Ukraine into the Western sphere of influence. We want to get them in NATO. We want to get them in the EU. And Vladimir Putin's looking at the geography of Eastern Europe, right? And he's looking at the energy reserves, the recently discovered energy reserves located in Ukraine and the Black Sea, south of Crimea. And he's looking at that and seeing that if NATO stations troops and tanks and missile launchers in Ukraine, Russia is vulnerable. They cannot defend themselves from a NATO presence in Ukraine. This is that would be a very similar circumstance to what we saw in the United States during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
It's
right?
exactly the same.
No,
As
the
what we saw.
similarities are uncanny, right? You had a friendly government, right? You had a U.S. friendly government in Cuba, overthrown by a revolution funded by the other side of the Iron Curtain, right? Now all of a sudden you have a hostile nation right on your border, right? It's right there. And all of a sudden, in the case of Cuba, it was shipping nuclear weapons to the island. In the case of Ukraine, it was trying to get them into the NATO alliance, right? And we said, no, red line, do not cross. If you do not take your nukes out, we will invade Cuba. That's what we said to the Soviets. Now, fortunately, it didn't get that far because the Soviet Union wisely backed down and said, okay, no, we're going to leave Cuba alone. We're not going to put any troops or missiles or anything in Cuba, right? Whereas the United States, we're like, oh yeah, we'll let Ukraine into NATO. We're gonna integrate NATO's armed forces into NATO's armed forces. And considering that we've been already stationing NATO troop forces in the Baltics and Poland, who's to say that we wouldn't do the same in Ukraine? And Vladimir Putin, for years and years and years, said, "Niet means niet. Do not allow Ukraine into NATO."
Right.
And us being the arrogant, stupid Westerners that we are, thought we could do whatever the fuck we wanted. I mean, after all, we did whatever the fuck we wanted in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. Need I go on? No. We did whatever the fuck we wanted to do all over the world, and we thought there would never be any consequences. That blowback only refers to Middle Eastern terrorists. It doesn't apply to Eastern European dictators. And what do you know? Realpolitik still exists, right? Spheres of influence are still important to countries. And we crossed that red line, and now Ukraine is paying the price for our blunders.
Yep. The other thing is about taking Ukraine into NATO that rubbed Putin the wrong way is he was very fearful that a NATO-aligned Ukraine would then militarily retake the Crimean Peninsula that, remember, he annexed in 2014 under what some people consider to be suspicious circumstances. That's neither here nor there. The fact of the matter is that it legally belongs to Russia now, but he is afraid that they would take it back, and Crimea is the only warm water port that Russia has. Like, period. You know, the world's largest country by landmass only has one warm water port, and it's in a hotly contested area.
They can't even get warships out of the Black Sea without going through Turkey. And then they can't get out of the Mediterranean without going through Spain or Egypt. So They're bottled up as it is.
Yep. And the thing that you just mentioned about Turkey is that Turkey has closed the Bosphorus Straits to warships. I had heard initially that it was to Russian warships, but Turkey, surprisingly, has taken a very level-headed and nuanced approach, and they said, no warships at all are going through the Bosphorus Strait on our watch. We control it. Nobody is going in or out unless those warships are going to their home port.
Well,
that is the only exception.
Here's the interesting thing about the Bosphorus is that Turkey does not actually control the Bosphorus when it comes to trade.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they cannot levy a tax on ships that go through the Bosphorus. They cannot stop international trade going through the Bosphorus. And this is all outlined in various treaties that the Turks have signed. They can cut off the Bosphorus to warships.
That's what they've done.
Yep.
It's a 1936 treaty that they're invoking right now. And one of the things that I've heard, and take it for what it is, I don't know if anybody believes in this sort of stuff or not, but apparently there's a 100-year-old prophecy in the Orthodox Church made by a guy name is like Pythiros of the Athenite or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. I know it's something that starts with a P, and it's the Athenite.
Putin.
Putin the Athenite. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's a but it's a prophecy from about 100 years ago that this guy said that when Turkey closes the Bosphorus to Russia, it will signal the beginning of the end to Turkey. Turkey will be carved into 4 separate entities, and the end of the world is nigh, or something like
Well,
that.
I don't like that part, but can we at least retake Constantinople?
Yeah.
Right. All eyes are on Kiev. Join me, brothers.
You know, Ben, I feel like I come in the show and I take all your time, and you're just listening to
No,
me.
that's fine. I've been so busy this week. I haven't hardly kept up on anything. So it was good you were available to come on. I'm curious who would carve up Turkey though? Who has? I mean, Turkey has been Turkey for so long, and it's ethnically Turkish. Who would have claims on Turkey?
Well,
See, I don't-
Greece for one.
See, I don't know. Like I said, it's a 100-year-old prophecy. So who knows what?
Well, like Greece would have the biggest claim historically. Russia would doubtlessly want a peace. Kurds would want to carve out their own state.
Yep.
That's 3 right there, right?
Yep.
I don't know. Give something to Armenia. Give Turkish Armenia, because like Armenia, half of historical Armenia is in Turkey. So there you go. There's your partition of Turkey. You get Armenia, Greece, Russia, the Kurds, and a little bit left for the Turks.
Yeah, Luke White over here says this sounds awfully close to the name of the guy that did the A squared plus B squared bullshit. That's exactly what I thought when I heard the prophecy and they said it's like Pythagoras of Athos or whatever. I was like, Pythagorean theorem?
That fucking
What?
Pythagorean bullshit.
Yeah,
The
You and your-
Pythagorean conspiracy.
you and your goddamn triangles. Get out of here.
You know, it's just a funny thing how
The Byzantines have a claim.
absolutely
Yeah.
you know, bring Rome back.
Right, and
Deus
that's
Volt, huh?
that's my brother, and I imagine when he typed that up, he did the Giorgio Tsoukalos Byzantines.
And just a reminder for everyone who hasn't been listening to this podcast for years and years. I did a show with the host of the History of Byzantium, Robin Pearson, years ago.
It was
It's-
wonderful.
It was and not only was it wonderful, but he put it up on his podcast. Like that interview I did, I am on the History of Byzantium podcast, which is just dream come true. I love
Yes.
that show. But
that's-
I'm a big history nerd.
Yes. So what else is
Oh,
going
what
on?
about what Finland and Sweden's response was to Russia? What did you think of that?
Oh, yeah, aren't they trying to join NATO now?
Yeah, and Russia commented on something like be military consequences, and Finland was like, "Oh, we know how to deal with those Russians." But I guess Finland's entire military force is just built to counter Russia. That's all they've done.
I mean, who else are they afraid of? Like, did they think Sweden's going to invade? No.
Swiss even took a side in this, which is
That's rare.
that's deeply suspicious.
So if things, how do you guys see this scenario playing out? Like, if things were to escalate, what would be the flashpoints that make that happen?
Probably if Ukraine tries taking Crimea back.
Oh, that's not going to happen. That's gone at this point. They'd be lucky to hold on to their own country, much less retake Crimea. But
I don't know. I don't know if Russia stalls out and we keep pumping arms and money into Ukraine. Who knows what could happen?
No, I don't see it. Here's the thing: you can pump in arms into Ukraine all you want, but all Russia has to do is bomb the supply lines on the Ukrainian side of the border. Right? What are we going to do? Like, we give Ukraine, we load ammunition onto trains in Poland, ship them into Ukraine, and then the Russians blow up the trains on the way in.
Alternatively, Poland decides Belarus has way too much shit in there and they go on the offensive. So that's the only way I see it really lighten up.
Well, I mean, Ukraine has applied for EU membership. and the EU Parliament has agreed to. They've accepted the application. Not that they've accepted Ukraine as a member, but they have accepted the applications. See, this is another thing that's really pissing me off, because that only makes things worse for Ukraine, right? As Ukraine is right now, they can sit at the table and make concessions to Russia and still have a country, right? That can happen. But if the EU is telling Ukraine that at the cease of hostilities, they'll allow Ukraine into the EU, well, then now Putin doesn't have a choice but to take the whole country. Because he's not going to allow Ukraine to be allied with the West. He can't. At this point, he's already gone too far to allow something like that, right? What he probably wants is to annex some of the East and puppet the rest, right? Like, yeah, Ukraine, you can be your own country, but you're neutral. You're always going to be neutral or side with us. You are never, ever going to ally yourself with the West. But if the West says, yeah, once this war's over, you're in the EU, it's like, well, I got to take the whole thing now. I can't stop. So it's like,
I don't think Russia has the capability to hold Ukraine. I just don't see it.
I mean, why wouldn't they? I mean, occupations really come down to how brutal the occupier is willing to be. Like Americans have this conception that occupations don't work. No, occupations work. You just got to be willing to really want it.
Well, see,
right?
that's the thing that I was thinking about it today. That I don't even know if that will work out, because that old saying of the tighter you squeeze, the more it runs through your fingers. In today's theaters of warfare, the good old days of rolling into some place's capital, locking it down, and planting your flag on the Capitol building and saying, I win. Those days are over. We left that shit in the 1940s. We live in an age today of obstinate insurrections where nobody is going to give an inch if an occupying force takes over their area. And you're right to a certain extent that an occupying force, in order to do that, is going to have to be brutal. And in a way, they're almost going to have to be medieval. Like, if you want to occupy an area, you have to kill the people that live there and put your people in their place.
Or dislocate them.
And it used to be, you take a capital. All right, well, we took out all your communications infrastructure. You're done. I mean, you can't do that anymore. I mean, you got Starlink over there. You have improved two-way communications. You have cell phones. I mean, for Russia to take out all the communications for their command structure, it's got to be about impossible.
Well, just think of the kind of occupations the United States have had, right? Think of Afghanistan.
I try not to, but
yeah, think of Afghanistan. No, like Afghanistan is built for a guerrilla insurrection campaign. Like, Afghanistan is the perfect country to be an insurrectionist, because it's mountainous, it's full of caves, it's disjointed. The different parts of the country aren't well connected to each other, right? Now think of Ukraine. It's flat. The whole country is flat. There's nowhere to hide. There's no caves. There's no mountains. There's no way to run. There's nowhere to run away to, right? That's an advantage for an occupying force. Now, I don't think Russia wants to occupy the whole of Ukraine. I think they want to occupy some strategic locations. They want to occupy the area around Crimea, because a lot of people don't know this, but Crimea is a very arid place, right? And one of the things Ukraine did once the Russians took Crimea is to build a dam that blocked off fresh water to Crimea, right? So that's one of the things that the Russians are going to want to do. They're going to want to take the area around Crimea in order to secure fresh water for the peninsula. Because like Hobb said, they can't leave Crimea. It's got the only warm water port the Russians have, and they're going to hold it no matter what, right? So they probably don't want to occupy the whole country. They probably don't want to do that. What they want is to install a Russian-friendly government. Right? That's my prediction. I'm not an expert, but that's what I would think they want.
There's got to be plenty of Ukrainians in Russia, though. I mean, say you go brutal, like he's saying. At what point do the Ukrainians in Russia start setting off car bombs in Moscow Square?
Well, see, that's what I'm saying. They probably don't want to go that route. Yeah. Right? They probably want there to be an independent Ukraine that they, are the puppet masters of. But if that independent Ukraine is going to be allowed into NATO or the EU, does Russia have a choice at that point? Right? No. They can't leave the possibility of this war being for nothing. They're going to have to take the whole country and install a Vichy French regime. Right? They're going to need a real puppet, not just one that they have the majority of influence over, but one where they literally have Russian troops occupying the country, and regardless of if they can pull that off, that's going to be a huge hardship for the Ukrainians, even if they fight a guerrilla campaign.
I don't think Russia can handle that. I don't think their economy can handle that. I mean, we talked about this last week. Their economy is only the size of California's.
But see, that's not the point, though. The point is they'll try. And by trying, they're going to cause a lot of needless death and suffering in Ukraine, even if they end up having to pull out of that occupation. And it's all needless, right? It's all neat. There's no reason right now to tell Ukraine that you're going to allow them into the EU. That's just an escalation. That's just forcing Putin's hand even further. And of all the stupid blunders that the West has made leading up to this, it would be a huge shame to add that on top of that list.
Yep.
Yeah, we got some comments over here. Did you see those?
Yeah, I've been kind of scrolling through them here. Let me go back up here and see. Yeah, Dewey Shelbourne's going off on the World Economic Forum, the WEF. It means most NATO-involved countries are also involved with WEF, which means NATO is slowly becoming the armed forces that punishes countries who don't follow the WEF's ideals. Yes, and also no, because Putin is also a WEF guy. He was one of Klaus Schwab's young global leaders thing. I think he might have graduated in the first class back in 79 or something like that.
Funny how these people all know each other.
Which circles back to my theory about how they're all talking and wheeling and dealing behind the scenes. But NATO slowly becoming the armed forces that pushes countries that don't follow the WEF ideals. NATO, for the most part, is kind of a paper tiger, with the exception of the United States. And
we also have France and the United Kingdom, who are also nuclear powers.
They are, but they're also very reticent to use those powers. They're also,
well, I mean, who isn't reticent to use nuclear weapons?
Apparently, a lot of the neocons in our own Congress.
Can we just hang those people? Like, anybody in Congress calling for no-fly zone over Ukraine? The January 6th, their ass. I don't care. Do it.
Adam Kinzinger, you are on notice, sir. Let's see here. Byzantines. The 80-mile-long trucker convoy. Yeah, that's happening here in the United States.
Is it really 80 miles?
Yeah. I guess a bunch of them merged, and now they're on their way.
Can we talk about this for a second? How COVID all of a sudden is not the big story in the world anymore, just in time for the CDC to change their recommendations, and for all these states to drop their mandates, and for countries around the world to end their vax passports, and all this stuff just all of a sudden goes away. And because we're all distracted by Ukraine, nobody's talking about it.
Hell of a goddamn coincidence, don't you think?
Man, Putin should have invaded earlier if he'd known that would cure COVID.
Yeah. Apparently apparently somebody called into Hornady and asked if they would donate 2,000 rounds of 6.5 so he could go to Ukraine. Let's see.
You know, in these kind of wars where foreigners pour in, they tend not to be treated well if they're ever caught. So just remember that.
That comment, Luke White. Lot lizards everywhere be rubbing their mitts.
Yep, that is 100% true. Yeah. Oh, so yeah, like we got like what 10 minutes left. Let's talk about the slur of the Union for the next 10 minutes. I'm kind of burned out on Ukraine and Russia.
Well, speaking of it, Joe Biden spent like the first 20 minutes talking about Ukraine. I'm sitting here listening. I'm like, is this the State of the Union or the State of Ukraine? Like, who does he think he's the president of right now?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there were some gem moments in there, like he may surround Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never win the hearts and souls of the Iranian people.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Fact check, true.
Oh, that is true on that one. All right, we'll give him that.
Yeah.
Or when he said he was going to fight inflation by lowering prices. Like, yeah, bro, that's what inflation is. High prices. So you're going to fix inflation by fixing inflation. Genius move, Joe Biden. Thanks.
Yeah.
I just took that to mean they would publish like weekly price controls for everybody of what they could charge, because that works so well every time it's ever been tried in history.
Yep. So what was some other some golden
well,
moments?
Pelosi. Well, you talked about Pelosi rubbing her mitts. It was when what was it? Biden mentioned the diesel poop pit burning, and she got up and started. It's like, what? Did you see that?
Yeah, that was that's a little bit odd. Like, ooh, yes, diesel fuel and feces is my favorite. It's like, have you ever seen a fly land on something and like rub its front legs?
I thought she was an alien trying to keep her skin suit on and just.
Yeah, do you think Joe Biden ever looks at Hunter and goes, "The wrong kid died"?
All right, yeah.
Like, how did the fuck up live? The cool kid.
What is that? Did you just reference the Dewey Cox story?
Yeah, I did.
Oh shit!
It's a great movie, by the way.
No, I think I do want some of that marijuana.
This is Viagra. It gives you a boner. You not hear me? It gives you a boner.
Hunter Biden is Dewey Cox. That's a pretty apt comparison.
You know, I gotta say, every time Joe Biden brings up this story about his son getting cancer in the burn pits, I just want to go, "You sent him there, you asshole!" Like, you killed your kid. Fuck you. And lots of other kids, by the way. You know, we don't talk about this. You know, 1 million Iraqis died in that war, right? 1 million Iraqis, right? Nobody talks about that. Nobody was going around stealing American entrepreneurs' yachts for that. No one was kicking American athletes out of the Olympics for that.
Those were
and you
brown
know what?
people.
They probably should have. Yeah, those are barbarians, as Ben Shapiro said today. Like, yeah, we're fighting barbarians.
That
like,
was white on brown violence. It's fine. It's when you get white on white violence that the left loses their mind, I guess.
I just hate the hypocrisy because the United States has been this international bully for years. And I don't even know why I bother listening to Ben Shapiro when we're talking about foreign policies. Because I actually heard him say the other day, like, oh yeah, the big problem with American foreign policy is we've been too isolationist for the past 20 years. Like, God damn it, Ben. I went to Iraq. Do you think an isolationist country would have sent me to Iraq?
I'm curious what he thinks we need to be doing if he thinks we've been isolationist for the last decade.
You know, I will say he has actually had a pretty good take on this present war, because I think the moment we're in has sobered him a bit. Is he's looking at this and going, oh shit, this is actually real. Because his take on this is like, look, Putin has to win this war. There's no circumstance where he doesn't win this war. And the longer it goes on, the greater the chance that he's going to do something drastic in order to end this thing. And his take was, look, guys, I know it sucks, but we have to give him an out of some kind. Right?
Yeah.
Well, Hobbs already said what the out is.
Right? Because if we don't give him an out, then things have the potential to get bad.
Yep.
Right? And as stupid as Ben Shapiro is on foreign policy, he's right about that. You got to give Russia an out.
All right, gang. Listen. Maneuver warfare. Combined arms. Maneuvering.
Not fast enough. Speed it up a bit.
1967, 6 Days War. Haven't seen it since then. Nuclear warfare on the table. Okay, gang?
Like I don't understand why you all are blaming America for this. America had nothing to do with any of this. Anyone that says America or Israel had anything to do with any problems going on all over the world, you're absolutely out of your mind. Okay, guys? Okay, gang? Now let's talk about your sleep. Tempur-Pedic mattresses.
Is that the Ben Shapiro show in a nutshell? I don't think I've ever watched it even.
Guys, America needs to secure itself, just like you need to secure yourself online. Now let's talk about NordVPN.
Yeah, it's like a squirrel on Adderall.
And then
doing
Abby comes on for
advertise.
American Dairy Association.
Okay, so let's I think I can sum up the in the last couple of minutes that we have left here. I think I could sum up the slur of the union the other night with border security is now good. Whether it's our border security or the border security of a small Eastern European country
Of Iran.
is neither here nor there. Putin's trying to woo the Iranians. We need to fund the police.
That's it.
COVID is over, and make
gonna-
America great again. Basically,
Exactly.
he used all of Trump's talking points except for just if he would have said "Make America Great Again," I would have known that a troll was
Blue MAGA.
behind his teleprompter.
You know, had he come out and said, "And I'll send Hillary to jail," I'd be like, "Done. I'm voting for you."
So
Joe
he's
Biden,
for funding
woo!
the Democrats are for funding the police again.
Bro,
Okay.
he's like, we all know that you can't defund the police. The answer is to fund the police. I'm like, who the fuck are you?
There was cheering and a few boos.
Like, no, like this is, you know how these things are just pageantry. So that they all knew when he was going to say that. So they're like, okay, guys, when he said fund the police, everyone on TV is going to be like, huh? What?
Yep.
So what you got to do is you got to cheer very loud. You're like, oh yeah, the Democrats were always for funding the police. Stupid.
Like, yeah, fund the
Like,
what?
like, bro, this isn't 1984. You can't just tell me we've always been at war with East Asia and expect me to forget the last 2 years.
Yep.
What was this? Somebody posted over here. He said the Second Amendment's for hunting again.
Oh yeah, he's like,
deer don't wear Kevlar.
yeah. He basically at the turn of a dime praised the Ukrainian government for handing out automatic
The
weapons.
Iranian government.
Or the Iranian government for handing out automatic weapons to their citizens. Took a drink of water. And then started going about how we need to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines in this country. We've always been at war with East Asia. What are you talking about?
Like, look, Luke White sitting here. Like, this segment brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends. I wonder if he's been listening to Tim Pool's show too, because that was a big joke on their show. Like, what if this whole war was just so Putin could get in front of the world and go, guys, I have a very important message to bring you in regard to this. But first, let's talk about Raid Shadow Legends.
Yeah. I particularly like Count Dankula's plug for Raid Shadow Legends when he goes, but first, it is in fact your boy, Raid Shadow Legends.
Well, I mean, the Ukrainian war is turning into some corporate sponsored thing. I see everybody's got. I mean, it's the new rainbow flag.
Right. Like
You
now,
know-
everybody that had a "Stay home, stay safe" banner on their profile, they now have a Ukrainian
I
flag
mean,
on there.
even this streaming we use here. Look at this. There we
Yep.
go.
You know,
Right.
you know what?
They got it
Just
ready
for
to go
that-
for people.
Just for that, I want Ukraine to lose now. Fuck you, Ukraine. Go Russia. Yeah.
When the worst people in the world are
Red, white, and
insisting,
blue. Red, white, and blue.
when the worst people in the world are insisting that you take one particular side, it's time to take a pause
Yeah, it's like
and reassess.
I'm gonna go
Bombing
order
civilians is bad, but I hate all these people over here telling me.
Sorry, Ukraine, you're gonna have to take an L on this one, man. I
Yeah.
just cannot be seen to be agreeing with the likes of Hillary Clinton.
So,
Yeah.
well, we're at an hour there. We hit all the big points for the week. I think. Thanks for joining us, Nathan.
Yeah, absolutely. It was
Anytime you want to
fun.
come on, let us know. If you're not following us on all our media, we're on YouTube. We're on Rumble now. Instagram. Nathan's the one responsible for a lot of the Instagram posts.
Yeah,
We're
and
on
I'm the one that
Facebook.
got a shadow banned. Fuck me.
Yeah, he's the one that gets us banned also. So just look for Roads to Number 2 Liberty on all those, and you'll find us.
Yep.
We'll be back. You got anything coming up for interviews, Hobbs?
I'll check in with Alex and see if he can come on tomorrow. If not, maybe I can get him on next week, and then I'll.
Yeah, let's shoot for next week,
Okay.
and we'll let you guys know if we're gonna have that show. So, thanks for watching.